One night, a little boy was in his bedroom when he saw something very scary on the wall. It was a huge shadow, and it looked like a monster. The boy got so scared that he ran to his father and said, "Dad, there's a monster in my room." The dad, who was a very brave man, wasn't scared at all. He took a candle and walked with his son back to the room. When they went back, the shadow was still there, and it looked even bigger now. But then the boy's dad did something very clever. He asked his son to stand right in front of the candlelight. And as the boy stood there, his shadow was also on the wall. And they saw that the scary monster was actually a small toy horse that was standing right next to the candle. The tiny horse had cast a huge shadow on the wall. The boy's dad smiled and said, "Do you see, my son? Many fears in life are just like this shadow. They may seem big and scary, but if you bring them into the light, you will see that they are not as big as you think." Then the boy wasn't afraid anymore, and he understood that sometimes our fears can be very silly. So the next time you feel scared, remember the boy and his dad. Just like the candle in the story, your fears will become smaller and you will become braver. Now let's think about the important lessons from the story. The first one is that sometimes our fears can make things look bigger than they are. When the boy was in his room alone, his fear made the shadow look like a huge monster. But when his dad came and brought light into the room, the monster turned out to be a small toy. This teaches us that we should not let our fears control us or make decisions for us. Instead, we should try to understand our fears and not let them grow bigger in our minds. The second lesson is that we should always face our fears. When the boy was scared, he could have stayed in his room and kept imagining scary things, or he could have run away and hid somewhere else. But instead, he did the right thing by telling his dad and bringing light into the room. When we face our fears, they become smaller and we become braver. And finally, remember that you're not alone in this world. If you ever feel scared or afraid, just reach out to someone you trust, like a parent, a teacher, or a friend. They will help you bring the light into your room and show you that your fears are not as big as they seem. So the next time you see a scary movie or hear a scary story, remember the boy and his dad. Be brave and don't let your fears control you. Because just like the shadow in the story, your fears will become smaller and you will become braver. Once upon a time, a young man came to a wise and old teacher. He said, "Master, my life is full of bitterness. Nothing makes me happy. I work, but I don't get appreciation. People fight over silly things. I feel lonely. Life is hard and it seems meaningless." The teacher listened patiently, and then he took a handful of salt and gave it to the young man. "Put this into a glass of water and drink it," he said. The young man did as told, then he spat it out immediately. "It's too salty. I can't drink it." The teacher then took the young man to a large lake. He dropped the same handful of salt into the water and said, "Now drink from the lake." The young man bent down, drank the water, and this time it tasted fresh and sweet. The teacher turned to him and said, "Life's bitterness is like this salt. It is the same for everyone. But the bitterness feels greater or smaller, depending on the vessel that holds it. If your heart is small like a glass, the bitterness will overwhelm you. But if your heart is wide like a lake, you will hardly notice it." Then the wise man said, "Go now and embrace all of life, the good and the bad. Don't try to avoid the bitterness, for that is what makes your heart grow larger. And the more you embrace, the less bitter your life will become." This story teaches us that we cannot avoid bitterness in life, but we can choose the size of our heart. The young man in the story complained that his life was full of bitterness. He felt overwhelmed by the challenges he faced and the pain he experienced. This is a common human experience. Sometimes life can feel like a cup that's already full, leaving no room for anything else but misery. However, the wise teacher in the story offered a different perspective. He showed the young man that the amount of salt, which represents the bitterness in life, is the same for everyone. What differs is the container, the size of our hearts. When we have a small heart, a little trouble can make us feel miserable. On the other hand, when our hearts are big, the same troubles become bearable. The choice, therefore, is ours. Do we want to be like the young man with a small glass heart constantly overwhelmed by life's bitterness? Or do we want to be like the wise teacher with a big lake heart, able to hold both the sweetness and the saltiness of life without being overwhelmed? The answer, of course, is to cultivate a big heart. To embrace the teachings of the wise teacher and learn to hold more, both the good and the bad, the sweet and the bitter. Only then can we truly live a full and meaningful life. That's all for today. See you next time. Once upon a time, not too long ago, there was a young man who loved to play the piano. One day while he was playing, a few of the keys broke and no longer made any sound. At first he tried to fix it, but when he couldn't, he stopped playing altogether. It seemed pointless to him to play a song that was missing some notes. He just sat there looking at the keys that no longer played, thinking to himself, what's the point? It's not perfect, so why bother? And so the piano sat there, gathering dust. One day an old musician visited him. He too loved to play the piano. When he saw the old piano, he asked if he could sit at it and play. The young man simply nodded, still annoyed that the piano wasn't in perfect condition. The old man sat down and started to play. The melody he played was beautiful, even though several of the keys didn't make a sound. The young man couldn't believe his ears. He asked, "How can you play music on a broken piano?" The old musician stopped playing, looked at the young man and asked, "Why do you think I only played a few notes?" Confused, the young man answered, "Well, those are the notes that make the song. Why would you play broken notes?" The old musician smiled and said, "Perfection is not required to create beauty. Even with broken keys, a song can still move hearts if you focus on the notes that remain." The young man couldn't help but smile back. He'd never thought of it that way before. From that day on, the young man played the piano again, and his music was more heartfelt than ever. Whenever he felt like giving up because something wasn't perfect, he remembered the old musician's words, "Focus on the notes that remain."